found my video. Today we're going to be making some crawfish etouffee, the traditional Cajun dish that everybody loves. These are the ingredients that we're going to need, and of course the crawfish tails are the key. Louisiana crawfish tails is all I recommend. They'll have a little bit of fat on them, and that is where the flavor comes from. We're going to start out by making a butter roux, which you can make a roux with any kind of fat that you want, but for a crawfish etouffee, butter roux is the way to go. And we're going to have the Trinity as the base. We'll cut that up, and you know that the Trinity's yellow onions, bell pepper, green bell peppers, and celery. We're going to add some green onions to that and some garlic. We're going to use a chicken stock in this for today. You can use a crawfish stock or you can use a vegetable stock if you want to, but my favorite, if I don't have crawfish stock, is a chicken stock. Our herbs and spices that the herb and spice blend that we're going to use is going to be thyme, oregano, and basil, some white pepper and some black pepper that will give it a nice little kick, bay leaves, some cayenne pepper, which is really an optional thing if you want a little bit more heat, but the main ingredient is Le Bon Papa Creole seasoning, which happens to be sponsoring this video. So we're going to get all these prepared, because the first thing we want to do is have a beer, read the recipe all the way through, and then we're going to prepare our ingredients all the way through, so all we have to do when we're cooking is just assemble the recipe, and it'll be easy as pie. So we'll be back and show you all the ingredients prepared. Okay, welcome back. And what we've done in the meantime is we've performed our mise en place. Okay, so we've prepared all the ingredients, and what you do, you want to chop, you want to measure, anything you have to do to prepare the ingredients. You want to get that ready before you start cooking anything. So what we have is we put in each container all the stuff that goes in at one time. So we have our Trinity all chopped up because it's going to go in at one time. We've got our garlic chopped. We've got our green onions chopped. We've got our flour and our butter measured for our roux, and we've got our herbs and spices all measured out and put together, ready to be used. The most important thing we have is we've got our crawfish tails, and we've put on them an ample amount of Le Bon Papa Creole seasoning so that they're sitting there soaking up that goodness until we're ready to use them. Now, one thing too, once you started with a beer, is you want to look at the equipment that you're going to use. So this recipe is one that I call a two-pot recipe. Use a cast iron Dutch oven and a stock pot, and you'll see how we use those, but this is all the equipment that you're going to need besides what it takes to get everything prepared. So next we'll do is we're going to start putting this recipe together on the stove, and before long we'll have a delicious Cajun Crawfish Etouffee. So now we're back and we are ready to start putting this recipe together. Like I said, it's a two-pot method on that. So we're going to put in this stock pot, we're going to put about three or so cups of stock, and we're going to let it come to a boil while we're preparing the gravy and things for the etouffee. Now, to start out with the gravy, we're going to start with a butter roux. We're going to take about 8 tablespoons of butter, which is a lot. And we're going to melt that, and then we're going to add the flour to it to make the roux. Now, don't worry about the ingredients. They're all in the recipe on the website. And plus, you don't want to get over anxious about exact amounts. Just put in what you feel. The quantities are on the recipe card on the website, and you can figure all that out. So we're going to melt the butter and get it nice and bubbly, and then we're going to add the flour. Okay, so now we've got the butter nice and bubbly. We're going to go ahead and add the flour and get it going. And the secret here is not to overdo the roux. So usually what I do is I cut the fire off and maybe even pull it away from the fire a little bit while the roux is putting together. And then that way it goes a lot slower, which doesn't make a good video, but it makes a better roux. But you can see how creamy it is, and that butter roux is some kind of delicious. Makes all the difference in the world with an etouffee. I don't care whose recipe you do, If you start with a butter roux, it's going to be good. So I just kind of put the fire on for a little while, take it off. I do not want the roux to get too brown, but I want it to get brown enough. And then once you put the vegetables in, we'll do the same thing so that the roux doesn't continue to cook. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes on this roux, and you can see that it's starting to get like a light peanut butter shape, and that's kind of what we're looking for as far as getting to the next step. Now this roux will continue to cook throughout the process, so that's one thing you have to be careful with an etouffee. So what I'm going to do now at this stage, I just turned the fire off again, and I'm going to take the Trinity and put it in there and continue to cook the vegetables, stir it in here, switching to a nice big old wooden spoon that my mother-in-law gave me. Got all the right juice in it. So we're going to do that now. The roux may look a little light right at this point, but it's going to continue to brown as this continues to cook. So we're going to let this cook without the fire for just a few minutes, and then we'll turn the heat back on. Okay, so now this has been cooking. The roux and the Trinity been cooking together for about 15 minutes or so, and the vegetables are very well wilted. The onions are getting clear, and so it's time to go ahead with the next step. Which, while I'm doing this next step, we're going to make sure that the stock in the stock pot is at a full boil. So we're going to add the garlic. We're going to add the bay leaves, about half of the herb and spice blend, and about half of the green onions. You want to save some green onions for later on when we're doing the crawfish and to help top off the finished dish. So we're going to do that, and we're going to stir this around just for a couple of minutes until the garlic is aromatic, until you can smell that garlic taste and fragrance, and you know that's just a delicious smell. So we're going to get this finished up here while the stock comes to a full boil. Okay, so now we have the stock pretty much full boil. It's coming up to a full boil. We're going to take, with a slotted spoon, a spoonful of this roux and Trinity mixture. We're going to stir it until it is completely dissolved into the stock, and then we're going to do another spoon. We're going to let it come back to a full boil in between, and we're going to do spoonful at a time until we've got all of the roux Trinity mixture blended into the stock. Stock pot, I have about 3 cups of stock, and I've got another cup reserved for later in case if it ends up being too thick, then we can put some more stock in it and get it to the consistency that you want. And the reason I do it this way is this gives the time for the stock and the Trinity and the roux and the herbs and spices to all blend in. We're going to let this, when we're all done, we're going to let this on a pretty high boil for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to lower it to a low simmer, put the cover on it, and let it go for about 10 minutes. And during that time, all the flavors are going to start to meld together. And that gives us an opportunity to get the crawfish set up. The crawfish are already cooked. They're either parboiled, if you bought frozen Louisiana crawfish, they're parboiled. If you're using leftovers from a crawfish boil, of course they are fully cooked. So we're not going to try to cook them, we're just going to warm them through. Now we've got all the roux integrated into the stock, and we're going to let it on a pretty high boil for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to cover it, and it will simmer covered for about 10 minutes. Now we've got the stock and the roux and the Trinity simmering slowly in a covered pot for about 10 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and prepare our crawfish tails so that they can get smothered with this wonderful gravy that we're making. So we're going to melt about 3 or 4 tablespoons of butter, just like before. Add a little bit of the green onions, still reserving some for the end when we finish the dish. And when that's all melted, we're going to put the crawfish tails in it. Now, of course, they've been soaking in Le Bon Papa Creole seasoning, so they were delicious to start with, but you know they're more delicious now. So we just dump that in the butter, get all the juice. Let's see here. Clean up our mess. And then we're going to do this now. These are already cooked. These are parboiled. These are frozen crawfish, so they're parboiled. We don't need to cook them. We just need to warm them through, and then they will be thoroughly cooked. So we're going to do that. While those are warming up, we're going to add a little bit more of our herb and spice blend. And these crawfish tails always give off a little bit of liquid, which is fine. That's all flavor. And that's part of the fat that's on the crawfish tails. And believe me, that fat is where the flavor comes from. So we're going to let those simmer here for just a few minutes while they warm up and the stock is simmering. Okay, so now we're ready to combine the crawfish tails and this delicious gravy that we have. Now, étouffee means smothered, and that's the part that we're going to do right now. We're going to smother these crawfish tails in this delicious gravy. Now, you can see, as I said, the crawfish tails always give off some liquid, and that's part water and that's part of the crawfish fat. So they've been simmering for a few minutes, and this gravy is nice and thick and ready to go. So we're just going to pour that in. Got all this gravy in there, and that's the perfect color I was looking for. And you can see that the gravy was a little thick, but the liquid that the crawfish gave off is thinning that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this simmer for just a couple of minutes while those crawfish tails get all smothered up. And then we're going to finish it with a little butter. These crawfish tails have been smothering in this gravy for a few minutes, and now we're going to finish it off with a tablespoon or so of butter. And we're going to shake the pan while this butter melts and gives us a really, really creamy finish. Good, but I have a little bit of this Le Bon Papa Creole seasoning left over, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. But I think it's pretty darn good. Perfect. Done. Okay, our étouffee is done, and we're finally getting ready to eat it. So we start out with a little bit of white rice. Always have to have that étouffee over some hot rice. Look how good that looks. Look how good that looks. Sprinkle some of those green onions we've been saving on top of it. Let's give it a try. If I can get it. Oh man, that's good. That is good. You guys need to make some of this. See ya. Thanks for watching.